Good morning, everybody. Could I welcome you all and thank all of you for being here. It's a very special day today. Normally in ODI we host events in our institution, but when you announce that Hans Rosling is going to give a lecture on data, it's a little bit like saying the Pink Floyd are going to be playing at your local next week, or Jay-Z or somebody of that sort of stature. So we're incredibly lucky to have Hans with us. Before just making a couple of introductory remarks, there's one logistics point or point of information I need to make, which is that if there's an announcement of an emergency, it's a real emergency, and Barbican staff will take us through the processes for exiting the building. I was trying to find words for describing Hans's contribution and the role he plays in development. And actually that's a really tough thing to do. You can read his bio, but there are actually two words that really stand out for me that I think do summarize what Hans does. And those words are pia totum locomotor. And does anyone recognize the phrase? No, but you all ought to be reading your kids Harry Potter more at night, because pia totum locomotor is the spell used in Harry Potter to bring statues to life by Professor McGonagall, for those of you who are aficionados. And I think what Hans does is that he has this extraordinary ability to bring numbers to life and data to life, and to let data tell stories, and to transform data into a vehicle for achieving change and making the world a better place. So Claire is going to introduce Hans in a little bit more detail in a moment, but I first want to pass over to Claire Melamed, who leads our work on the Sustainable Development Goals. And Claire and her team have done an extraordinary job over the past few years in informing the Sustainable Development Goals. Claire is actually an advisor to the UN Secretary General on data work. And the thing about the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, is that governments like nothing more than to sign up to ambitious targets that nobody monitors. And the reason the data work in ODI is so important, and that we're so delighted to have Hans here, is that this is really about how do we make data a vehicle for achieving change. And there's nobody better in ODI than Claire Melamed to take us through that. So Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Hans. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I promise I won't detain you long, because I realise you are all here to listen to Hans and not to me. But before we hear from Hans, seeing some of the fantastic pictures that he creates with data, and as Kevin said, some of the wonderful stories that he tells and the ways that he demonstrates so beautifully how you can, numbers, just like words, can be used to tell stories and paint pictures of the world around us. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the data itself. Now, ODI is nearly as passionate about data as Hans himself. For the 50 years of our existence, we have been... Oh, something's going wrong there. Can we have the first slide, please? ODI is nearly as passionate about data. For the 50 years of our existence, we've been using data. Sometimes we go out in the field and collect data. We analyse data. But underlying all this is a very strong and passionate belief that numbers can be a tool for changing the world. I think, we absolutely believe that numbers can and have done this. But I think also, increasingly over the last few years, we've all become aware of how much we don't know. And particularly how much we don't know about the poorest and the most powerless. To take one example, I expect well known to many of you here, about 1/3 of children in the world don't have their births registered. Not only does that mean that they lack a legal identity and all the benefits that can confer, but it also means that a government who wanted to provide education services or health to those children wouldn't know that they existed in the first place, wouldn't know where they live, what their problems are, and where to put resources to actually give them the health and education that is their human right. Also, some of the most important, the issues that most affect the powerless are often the ones that are most absent from the statistical record. For example, only about half of all countries in the world collect data systematically on domestic violence. And this means that, obviously, it's very difficult to help to solve a problem if you don't know how big it is, you don't know where it is, and you don't know who is affected. So the lack of data means that the governments, the NGOs, many of you in the room who are trying to make a world a better place, and in the current language of the Sustainable Development Goals, to leave no one behind, effectively are doing this with one hand tied behind our backs. If we just take one of the numbers that we use every day, this is if you look on an official website, it will tell you that 179,000 women in Africa died in childbirth in 2013. Now, by any standards, this is a horrifically large number, but it's a number which is not quite as real as it seems. It's based on actual recorded data from only about 16% of births. Given that very weak, poor start, there has been a huge and valiant effort by many well-qualified and well-intentioned people to do the best we can on estimating what we think the maternal mortality figures are. Obviously, it's a crucially important issue that we want to know about. And as I say, no one's trying to trick anybody here. These are very well-intentioned, well-informed estimates, guesswork, essentially. And we see this number, but in fact, and let's hope it is, it could be as low as 133,000 women that are dying in Africa every year. Still a large number, not quite so horrendous. Or, horrifyingly, it could be higher. It could be 256,000. The margins, the confidence intervals, as we call them, around that data are so large that really, while we can be pretty certain about the trends, and Hans will show us, the actual numbers are a lot less sure than we think they are. Now, this is also, and this is the problem really for trying to use this data to solve this problem, these are based on national averages. That's fine if you're trying to monitor what's happening year on year across the world, and that's a very important thing that numbers can tell us. If you're a government who wants to actually know where to put its money or its midwives to start to solve this problem, one national average, while tells you something, doesn't actually give you the information you need. You need to know where these women live, which parts of your country women are dying in the greatest numbers, so you can understand where to put your resources to start solving the problem. In many cases, that's information that simply isn't there. But, having painted this rather bleak picture, let me tell you that things are, in fact, changing. In Liberia is a country that Hans and I expect many of you know well, not least because the recent tragedy of the Ebola outbreak. A few years ago, as part of the post-war reconstruction of the infrastructure, the government of Liberia, together with the private sector, international institutions, got together to try to create a map of the country's water points. And they did this by, not just by mapping in the conventional sense, also by taking photographs, by talking to local communities about which of the water pumps were working, how often they were working, whether they were being provided with the services they needed. They then uploaded this all and created a fantastic, publicly available map of all of the water points in Liberia, where you can look in great detail at where they are, what's working, what's not working, what kind of facilities are available where. And of course, this didn't just help the government when they were trying to rebuild the country's infrastructure. It was also helpful when the Ebola outbreak occurred. It allowed the government to look at where there was water to help decide where to site the health points. Because, of course, one of the absolutely critical things you need if you're setting up a new health point is a reliable source of clean water. So this is just kind of one example of what, in a fantastically brilliant piece of political marketing, we are calling the data revolution. The The data revolution is a phrase which over the last couple of years has, I think, somewhat to the surprise of many of us, many of you who've been plugging away at the data coalface for many years, has really caught the political imagination. And we have a kind of political focus on data in governments, among international institutions, the like of which certainly I've never seen before. Part of this, as Kevin said, is to do with the Sustainable Development Goals and the demands that everyone is suddenly, there's a meeting in Bangkok as we speak, trying to work out what are the indicators that we're going to use to measure these goals. And the current, I understand that the current list of potential indicators, data that might be used to measure these goals, runs to some 800 pages. So this is not going to be a small job, and I think this is really concentrating minds on why we need better data, not really importantly just to monitor these goals, of course, that's one thing, but also to achieve them. Governments are going to need better data to actually carry out the policies, do the things, use the resources to achieve these very ambitious goals. So it's no accident that the day after the Sustainable Development Goals were agreed in New York last month, we saw the launch of a new global partnership on sustainable development data. And this has brought together governments, companies, NGOs, academics, a whole range of people who are committed together to solving some of these critical problems, helping to use data to achieve the goals, to monitor the goals, and also to give citizens, NGOs, different kinds of organizations the information so that they can know whether the governments are keeping these incredibly ambitious promises that they've just made. I think we have a really exciting opportunity here. And this opportunity, of course, not least, is to do with the hard work of many of you who've been working on data, drawing attention to the problems with data, trying to use data in all kinds of ways for many years. Now, of course, every cause these days has its celebrities. Global poverty has Bono, humanitarian relief has Angelina Jolie, but data has its very own rock star. And we are incredibly excited to welcome Hans today to ODI and to the Barbican. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm here in exchange for the appreciation of your study, Financing the Future. That really helped us out a lot this summer when we made the documentary for BBC about how to end poverty in 15 years. It was a brilliant analysis. That little trick of moving from mean to median to understand the aid at different levels, that was really an intellectual contribution. So I thank you very much for that. That helped us up a lot. I'm here from Gapminder, and I'm here together with our new manager, Åsa Karlsson, who we have recruited this very week because we are trying to expand to be part of this data revolution in a more active way. But actually, you said one thing, I bring data to life. No, you can't do that. Data is so boring, it will never work. You can see lives through data. The numbers are not interesting, it's the lives that are interesting behind them. It's like the gearbox in the car. You have to go through the data, take it away, and see the people behind it. Now, you need the data to see all the people, because you don't have the data, you miss some people. So the data helps you to see all the people. And it's very interesting that at the same time we underuse data, we run the risk of relying too much on data at the same time. My experience from 3 months with epidemiological surveillance of Ebola in Liberia, working as a person in the Ministry of Health, being on the Liberian side, negotiating with international organizations, was that we didn't need so much data on Ebola. We needed to have the understanding of the lives behind the data. To manage to stop Ebola was not about counting people. It was about visiting those people, sitting down with them, gaining their confidence, and having them to tell us about their lives. And very much the success in Liberia was Musa Kafala, who had a public health training, with a PhD degree that was very much anthropology oriented. He was good at data, but the best thing was that he could go behind me. Let me tell you one story, how he did. We had these problems that when we listed the contacts to Ebola traces, some went missing. The contact tracer went to see them every day, and suddenly an 8-year-old boy was missing. And the mother said, I don't know where he is. The contact tracer tried to convince her, he didn't manage. He went to the supervisor went to talk to the woman and said, I just don't know, which was impossible. A mother couldn't say that about her 8-year-old, who had been exposed to Ebola from a neighbor. And we needed to see that boy every day. And we knew that if someone was missing out of 100 in the list, the probability they were missing because they were developing Ebola was quite high. So we had to have 100% coverage on contact tracing. So Musa Kafala, who led the whole operation of contact tracing, had to go himself. Being a very big man in middle age, he looked like clumsy dealing with women, but he was not. He had the kindest, biggest heart of everyone in that response. And he knew, having grown up in the slums of Monrovia himself, when he should go at midday, what he should bring as a lunch package for the woman he was visiting, how to be polite to her, leaving the car far away, not to be seen, walking in normally clothes that you would do in the suburb there, visiting the woman, talking with her. She accepted that they sat down and had the lunch from the lunch pack together. And then after a while, she told the story that she had had a husband who had beaten her severely. She had had a terrible life. Finally, the husband went away. And there was some peace in her life, but she was scared always. And he came every now and then and just grabbed one of the children to stay with him for some few days and then dropped them back. And she didn't dare to protest because he would just beat her. And her rights were so limited, so she couldn't go anywhere. And now he had to ask her, where is the child? He's with the father. What's the father's name? I'll never tell you. No one. I will never tell you. Where does the father live? I'll never tell you. He'll kill me. And then he had to continue to talk with her and find out, couldn't you go and look for your son? It's also about your son's life. And she started to cry, because I couldn't tell that man that the child had been exposed to Ebola. He would beat me. And then he managed to convince her that you go and find the child tomorrow, and tomorrow evening I'm back here. But I can't afford it. I have no money. And I have to go there. It's far away. I have to pay for the motorbikes. I can give you money. Oh, that's fine, she said. He took up the banknotes and gave them to her. She looked at them and said, these are new banknotes. If I pay the motorcycle taxi with new banknotes, they know that there's something fuzzy and they'll spread a rumor. You have to give me old banknotes. So he took the banknotes, he rubbed them on the floor, he did this and gave it back to her and said, no, everyone can see that these banknotes were rubbed. I have to have really bad banknotes. And he accepted that, and he walked away, and he changed at the market, came back in a very calm way, gave her the old banknotes, and left her, came back next evening, and the boy was there. You have to see the lives through the data. It's all about people's lives. It's all about individual life conditions, Then we need to have the numbers, because we need to know how many women are living in that condition. We need to secure that all these women get attention. But it was very interesting that bringing Ebola down from that terrible situation, you could use numbers. But even then, we did severe mistake by using numbers, because some cases who were very sick, some persons who were very sick, were picked up in their home, brought to Ebola treatment units, they died, they were cremated, and the family was not informed. You can never ever do that. You lose the trust of that. You can never, ever, in any situation, deal with people who dies as numbers. They are always persons, and you have to have a dignified funeral of it. So this is what I'll say. No, I don't bring data to life. I try to see the people through the data. And let me start with that doing with you. What I have prepared here is 7 factfulness questions about the world. In appreciation for the importance of the English language, Gapminder Foundation have given you a donation. It's a new word in your language. Please use it. Reduce. I'll explain later what we mean with factfulness. It's a little more advanced than mindfulness. Huh? Let's see how you are doing. Huh? I'll ask you, how many children will there be in the world in the future? When I was born, there were less than 1 billion children in the world, about 800 million. 0 to 15 years. And then it increased during my lifetime to hit about 2 billion at the turn of the millennium, at the turn of the century. And UN's population division has made an estimate how many children there will be by the end of this century. It's one of these lines. The other 2 lines I made up. They are just fantasy. And they are quite agreement. What do the demographers say? Do they say we have to expect a continued increase of children to hit 4 billion by the end of this century? Do they say, no, the rate of increase will be slower and we will be just 3 billion children? Or do they say, no, the number of children in the world has stopped increasing. It will only be 2 billion at the end of the century? A, B, or C. Can you use these devices? Now, one thing, you live in touchscreen, so we have found out you're so careful. This is analog stuff. You have to press really hard. Press really hard, you know. And if you change your mind, you can press once more. You can press once more. There we are. Very nice. Oh, you're quite quick. When I asked back in universities, they think for such a long time. Now, this is another way of asking. Out of 10 people in the world, how many have electricity? It's not 10, I can help you. Huh? It's not 100%. So 1 to 9, somewhere there. Thank you. Out of 10 girls in the relevant age group today, how many are enrolled in school? Is it 10%? Is it 50%? Is it 90%? I can help you once more, it's not 100%. Thank you. Out of 10 children, the 1 year old in the world, how many got measles vaccine? Measles vaccine being perhaps the most important thing in health service, being an indicator if you have at all access to basic health service. How many out of 10 children get that really important vaccine, measles? In sub-Saharan Africa, being the region in the world with the worst health situation, what has happened to child mortality over the last 20 years? We know it quite well, not due to these registration, but due to quite good surveys that are done with 3 years interval. It was 18% in 1990. How did it change? Has it fallen to half? Has it remained more or less the same? Or has it increased like this? And as you see, this is not a quiz. This is not about whether you know an exact number. If you know the trend going, it's getting worse, it's the same, it's getting better. Life expectancy in the world. How long we are expected to live at birth, a baby who's born, how long they will live if things remain the same, the risk in the different age group remain the same. And I'm helping you here also. It is 83 in Japan being the highest, and Sierra Leone and Lesotho have 45. One being post-war and the other being quite heavily HIV affected. So the world average has to be somewhere between 45 and 83. Do you think it's 50, 60 or 70? Extreme poverty, well defined already in the Bible, Matthew 6:11, our daily bread give us today. That means that having the subsistence secured, you are out of extreme poverty. And if you are not, you use almost all your resources for food. Has that percentage almost doubled, remained the same, or fallen to half? Thank you. We define factfulness like this: the stress-reducing habit of only carrying opinions for which you have supporting facts. And it's our director, Ola Rosling, my son, the creator behind all these things I do, who came up with this. You see, we want it not to be nerdy with data. We want it to be modern, to be fact-based. And in fact, if you know the world, you will have less crashes, less conflict, less problematic things happening to you in the coming decades. It's much easier, it's more relaxed knowing it. And we think that we have come to the end of the post-industrial relativism, where everyone has the right to have their opinions. And you were not voting now, you were answering. We have brought right or wrong into the debate again. And let's see how you did on these questions. This is how the Swedes answered. We use web-based survey companies, and we thought, could you really measure knowledge? Yes, you can, because we used another company in Norway, and Sweden and Norway should be fairly similar, and we got similar results. We did it in Britain, and we did it in the United States. And this is the right answer. You had a quite good result. And I would like to ask, after those who knew that the number of children were not increasing, how many of you knew it from someone else than me? Yeah, it's a very bragging question, but it's interesting. I have one here. Where did you get it from?
I don't recall where I got it from.
But you knew it. It wasn't. Anyone else? Yes?
Newspaper.
Pardon?
A newspaper somewhere.
Newspaper, yes?
Fred Pierce discusses it.
Pardon?
Fred Pierce discusses it in People Quake.
Good. More?
National Geographic.
My ma. No one studied demography.
The World Health Organization.
Okay?
I downloaded the data from the UN Population Division a few years ago.
Yeah.
I looked at it.
And it's quite, it's there. I consider it now, you are good at this, but you see the numbers we get. I consider this the biggest event in the history of mankind that was ever completely missed by media and education. It's so huge. It's such a huge thing, But you were clearly over average here. Electricity wow. It's 80%. People coming out of extreme poverty, electricity is very high on their priority. If you would send people to rainforest who would really listen to people, very few go to rainforest and really listen to people, especially no one goes there and listen to young women. When will the feminists ever go to rainforest and get the correct study? Today we get reports from people go there and take photos of males who are 40 years old and have some sort of nice feathers and stuff like this and look very ethnic, People want electricity, 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 and 80% got it. You are here like this is like 40, 50 years after your time. And I think it's a shame that 20% don't have electricity. Wow. You are not factful. And this is serious, because you are the crème de la crème. You are the elite in the world. And you don't know that 90% of the girls are enrolled in primary school. This is not my study or anything. This is the official best data we have available. So what is the problem? Is the problem that we need more data, that we have to learn the bloody data we have? There just stressing me. I'm trying to teach the data we have, and while you're pouring in more. This is very, such a lot of effort is placed upon the rights for girls and women. Such a lot of success are achieved, and it's not known. This leaves young women throughout the world being met with severe bad attitudes. People in West Europe don't know that women in Syria have the same education level as West Europe had 1970. That's the educational level of women in Syria today. And I think it's a shame that not 100% go to primary school. I'm very concerned about this. But this is something else. Is it so that NGOs, those of you working for NGO, that it's one of the side effects of your work, this ignorance? I think so. I think so, because you put stories about these girls who doesn't go to school, and you rightly do so. You raise money, you have good project, but you leave the impression that these ones don't go to school. You have to correct that. You have to argue for future investments in human based on past success. And we have to, I think it's very typical. Is girls and women achieve something, it's not known. It's disregarded. And this has been such a fight. And what we know today in the world is that we are very soon getting into a situation where girls are doing better than boys. Of course, many of these girls get the quality of their primary education that is very far from what we want. The teacher may not be there all days. They may not be able to attend all the days. And this is primary school. We're talking about primary school. Then things get worse. Many people even tell me about, don't tell that, because we can collect so much money on that bad perception. So it's better that people in the rich country think they don't go to school and give us money to help this girl. I don't think that works. I think that time is over. The world is too complex for that. That will lead to this girl being left out in the future, because she lives in extreme poverty. And of those not going to primary school, how many percent are girls? Those who are out of primary school. 55% are girls, 45% are boys. It's not a gender issue. Listen to Malala. If some people would listen to Malala and not use her as a symbol. I was in the World Bank when she came visiting that day, and Kim asked her, why doesn't girls go to primary school? And she answered, girls and boys mainly don't go to primary school because they live in families that are so poor, so they had to work to bring food to the family. She took a deep breath. But there are also still some communities where there are cultural barriers for girls to go to primary school. She get it. If people just listen to her, if they would write in the newspaper what she says, rather than who she is, all these terrible personal portraits and personal fixations all the time. She's so knowledgeable. I have listened through carefully her interviews, and she gets it right all the time. And this really, you have to catch up. Next time I come here, I don't want to see any bars here.
But there are some countries where there's a huge number of girls not in school.
Yep, you're right. You're right. There are still some places where there are cultural barriers for girls, as Malala said. But most of those who don't go to schools are due to extreme poverty. Vaccination. 85%. Of course they are vaccinated. It's the most life-saving thing we can do to children. We've had this since the 1970s. It's the core, it's the center of aid. It's the most motivating for government to do to get vaccines to children. It's known throughout poor communities that there is measles vaccine and it saves lives. I've done quite a lot of field service in Bandundu region in Congo. which is one of the poorest parts, just inside Kinshasa, but quite poor. Down in the southern part of Bandung, there's really tough places, you know. I remember having an ill-prepared survey in a village where we had a riot, actually. We hadn't informed. We were going to collect blood. They were not well informed. And I had 200 persons attacking us, almost, wanting to throw us out of the village. And there was a suspicion that the village leader had got money for us or something like that. And I had to stand and explain with the translator what it was, that we were doing research, we were studying a disease. And after just about 2-3 minutes, a woman stepped forward, you know, and said, "Don't you hear that it makes sense what he's saying? Where do you think they picked that measles vaccine from? Do you think it grows on trees in their countries? Of course they do this research. That's what they call. That's how they find out these things that can keep us healthy. Measles vaccine proves for me what they can do. Take my blood, doctor." And then the whole switched off. I find so many clever women in these remote villages that get it. And they know how measles, how dangerous it is. Now in Britain, Sweden, you know, and in the US and so on, there are these post-industrial morons who don't get it. Because they have problem with the industrial society, the modern societies, and you know, and they don't see anyone dying from measles. And even if you get measles, we have such an advanced health service, you don't die from it. The 23 nurses and doctors from West Europe and North America that were flown out of West Africa during their first day of fever, not those who were flown too late, which were 3 or 4 persons. The ones who were flown out first day and had Ebola, no one died. Ebola is not a lethal disease if you have British health service. Measles is not a lethal disease if you have this. But in poverty, it's 1 in 10, 1 in 5 who die from measles. And they know it in the local community. There's a demand for this. And one of the main reasons why we have this catch-up in vaccination, what is it? What is 50% of the reason for the fall in child mortality? Women's education, because 90% of girls go to school. So these two, sorry, this was the one I wasn't going to show. Girls go in school and kids get vaccinated. They're very linked to each other. This is very linked to each other. And here, yes, this you knew. Now how would this happen if this didn't happen and this didn't happen? This is really, that is a little. It's a little that this data is known, but you don't see the lives behind the data. Behind the data like this is women who have been fighting for their daughters going to school. They have gone to school, they have their children, you know, growing up. They have the access to the vaccine because they demand it also. Vaccination is very interesting. It has to be the demand from the community, the local organization, the support from the government, and money coming from the aid organization with clever purchasing mechanism, so we get a steady supply. This is working. We have child mortality falling there. And Sweden here don't know it. Who is professor in global health in that country? You see, it's very difficult. And I went to the zoo, you know, in Stockholm, and I wrote ABC on bananas and gave it to the chimps, you know. And 33% got it right. This is, you saw the other ones about population, number of kids not reaching. Chimps were 3 times better. When you are worse than chimps, it means that you have preconceived ideas. You have a wrong idea. You don't guess. On this, with vaccination and girls in school, you didn't guess. You had a preconceived idea that it was much worse. You knew that there were girls who didn't go to school. You know that some go to school, but you don't have any idea about the order or magnitude, or some of you had, but most of you didn't have it. Yep. When you see the answer that get the lowest number of Swedes, then you know what's right, don't you? And here you are really chimps here, come on, 33%. It's interesting because what's difficult here is that the world average is closer to the best than to the worst. That's the new world. The average is closest to the best and to the worst. That's why you can't use the concept developing countries any longer. It's out, because it doesn't exist. It only exists at the tattoo in your brain. Because health has improved so immensely. Because 90% of girls are in school, vaccines are there available. What we saw before, electricity is in 80% of the homes. That's why people now grow up, and we have these enormous success in health, that we have more and more cancer and more myocardial infarction. That's what I call success. Because dying of cancer or myocardial infarction when you are 60 or 70, instead of dying from diarrhea when you are 3, or from tuberculosis when you are 18, that's the success we wanted. So many of the people, my colleagues, who say, oh, the non-communicable diseases are so big, we have to focus on that. Yeah, no, we have to celebrate it. That's what we wanted. I had one of my friends who came from Sierra Leone. He's my age, and he came very early to Sweden and turned out to be a good singer. So he did his PhD, but he became a musician so successful. He stayed back in Sweden, and he earned a lot of money on his music. And he sent it back to his father, and then came that year when he went back to see what they did with the money. And the father took his cousin, and they walked off to the rice field. And they showed him, when sun was setting, how they were spraying pesticides on the rice. And the now Swedish thinking Sierra Leonean, he said, oh, you have to be careful, you can get cancer out of that, Don't touch it, And the father said, son, that's what we want. We want to die in cancer like modern people. We hate to die in malaria, malnutrition, and diarrhea, and hunger, Now with this spray, we will die in cancer. That's right what we want. And you see, sometimes it's very difficult to see the world from the richest end. You don't see the lives behind the numbers. You have to see the lights behind the numbers. And the world is like this. Now, the last 20 years, the proportion in poverty, this you knew also. It's interesting, you knew those ones because you work with development, and you know those two MDG, that child mortality has gone down and that poverty rate have gone down. But you didn't know the underlying facts, that people have electricity, girls in school, and get vaccinated. That's why this have gone down, or largely explains why this have changed in this way. Yes, so factfulness was this. Now, let me now try to make an overview of the world. I will use this period I have here to try to give you what we call a fact-based worldview. And the idea here is not to replace all those specific knowledges you have on different areas. You worked on violence and women. You have worked on schooling, on road project. I know that you are very knowledgeable of different things. I don't do that. I just show you a shelf, like an IKEA shelf, where you can put all the knowledge you have. Because I think the main problem we are facing is that we don't have the underlying structure in which we put the detailed knowledge. And that's why it becomes a mess. It's like a garage where you put all your knowledge and you write developing world on it, and everything is inside that, and it's messed. We have to sort it out. First, people. The biggest change in our time, or in my time then, being 67. There were 6 children per woman back 1800, on average. Some had many more, some had fewer, some had none. And this was back in history. You go to the old Chinese censuses, you go to the rainforest, today where people don't live in modernity, it's about 5, 6. Because the human way of life is that you breastfeed for 3 years, you get the menstruation and the ovulation again after 3 to 4 years, and children are born with 3 to 4 years intervals. And then during a fertile period, you get like 5, 6, 7, something like that. So. And this didn't change much. Look here, I go all the way until I was in secondary school here. In 1965, it's fallen to 5. And Paul Ehrlich got scared, started to write The Population Bomb, which he published in 1968. And this was because death rates had fallen. Already here had fallen. So population, this remaining high birth rate or we should call it fertility rate. Fertility rate and birth rate are technically different things. Fertility is here, number of babies born per woman. And during my lifetime, this has happened. It's quite fantastic, isn't it? Wanted to get it to 2, and this is how far we have got. And that is enough for the number of children in the world to stop increasing. You have learned, many of you, that you need 2.1 child per woman for the population to be stable, but that's in a stable population where you have a life expectancy that's much longer. That is like 80 years. So actually for the world, for some peculiar little aspect, 2.4, 2.5 was enough for the number of children stopped increasing. And we know that this will happen. This is on its way. So if you look at region, Europe fell very fast, very early. And here it fell mainly by more and more women being deprived of reproduction. In West Europe, never had so many women had at least one child as in 1970. This fell because quite a lot of women were outside reproduction. It's what we call reproductive density, how the children are distributed across the women. And then America came like this, a baby boom in the 1950s, in North America and also in South America, actually. And Asia then came here comes Asia, and Paul Ehrlich got very scared. But this is what happened. 1.6 in China, 2.4, 2.5 in India. The number of children have stopped increasing in India. The whole Indian subcontinent, the number of children is no longer increasing. And by now, all girls are in school, but many of those schools have too low quality. Quality has to get up. That is the focus now, to bring up quality. And then, with girls in school, I don't know if I said that, I get this critique. Don't say that, because then people interpret it as you say that gender equity is not such a problem any longer. That's a very stupid conclusion. Getting through primary school, it's so basic, it doesn't even have anything to do with gender equity. It's just stupidity not putting girls into primary school. Gender equity, the real fight of it starts at age 14. That's when it starts. Actually, in that old time, those strange culture when girls were told to stay home while brothers went to school, they would cry for a year, and then they would adapt. But now, they have gone to school, they know how to read and write, they spent more effort in learning than their brothers, because their brothers could roam around and do whatever. So girls do better. And at age 14, they are told, no, you cannot go to your aunt in the city and take up that work. No, you have to marry that man. You have to do this, you have to do that. And if you try doing something else, you are threatened, you are exposed to violence, you may be raped. So this very brave campaign, which we all admire in India, where women stand up and say no to rape now. That is a result of girls having gone to school, having other expectations. I think that having gone to primary school made gender inequity worse, not less problematic. So what is the main cause of death in women from 15 to 19 years of age? Main cause of death in these later teens, young women, 15 to 19 years in the world. Suicide. And it's not suicide, and it's in middle-income countries, especially lower middle-income countries. Now falling in China, increasing in India. Having been very high in Iran, having been very high in Latin America. I had the privilege to be co-supervisor for the first study on suicide and suicide attempts in Vietnam. And we found a pattern where young women were not depressed for long periods. It was out of anguish, out of anger, really like a protest suicides when they could not live their life as they wanted. And the main method they used was agricultural pesticide. And while West Europe and North America are focused on some 25-year-old story of possible biomedical effects of pesticides in Central America that is of very limited importance, so says the professor of global health. We miss out that the main health effect of pesticides is young women committing suicide from pesticides. And it's tragic. It's a tragic epidemic we have. It's very difficult to deal with it. Actually, specifically to deal with it, I don't think it will work. It is gender equity that has to be achieved. And the world has just started to achieve that. It's really important. And fertility rate can fall without gender equity also being very big. Look at Bangladesh. Have fallen really much. Gender equity is very far away still in Bangladesh. Africa then, is anything happening in Africa? No, Africa, yes it is. And we know that this will happen. We don't know how fast Africa will come down. This is really a matter of discussion, and policy and what will be done, It may be faster. There are some institutes who have done some analysis that say, no, Africa will probably get down faster. You see, they are so slow, so almost as slow as Europe was. But then, Sweden forbid condoms 1909 and only allowed condoms to be sold again 1936. I was in the Student Union International Committee in 1968, 69 and 70, and we had a secret fund where we lended money to young female students who needed abortion. And where did they go to get the abortion? To Catholic Poland. To Catholic Poland. 1973 we got free abortion in Sweden, 1 year after India. We should be very clear that reproductive rights, that Swedes, and we are sort of proud that we talk about, those are not Swedish norms. They are modern norms. They are modern values. They are not Swedish values. Sweden was as ugly as any patriarchal society has ever been. So what we don't know is where we will end up here. This is very difficult to know. Will the world in the future be like Germany or Sweden? 1.5 children per woman or 2 children per woman? This we don't know. This is Bangladesh. See how they came down. Absolutely fantastic. Down at 2.2 now. Number of babies born per woman. And we asked Sweden, I managed to get SIDA, the Swedish aid agency, to include knowledge questions in their annual survey about the opinions about aid. So much about communication and there's no information officers any longer, just communication officers. Organizations used to employ teachers to be information officers. Now journalists are employed because there are very many good journalists, don't get work in media, so they are communication officers. And then we try to, what are the perceptions out there? What should we say so they like us? Rather than what do they need to know? What do we have that we need to tell them? And we put knowledge questions. Then we know that the Swedish audience, who relatively have heard about Bangladesh, they thought it was 4.5 children per woman. We gave them some alternative. The mean answer was this. So I kept teaching, and it came there. I kept teaching. I have quite a good media coverage in Sweden. Can you see the rate of improvement of knowledge in Sweden? And the rate of change in Bangladesh. This is interesting, that countries progress faster than this stupid old Westerner's head can improve. Not stupid, sorry, ignorant. It's not about being clever or not clever, it's having the information or not having the information. So that means that Swedes think Bangladesh is as they were about 1991, something like that, 20, 30 years behind. And of course, here is my sort of beloved bubble graph. What should I show you here? Babies per woman, I want to, and child mortality. Let me take you back to 1965 here, like this. And I should zoom in. I should have done this before. Here we are. That was some buggy, something happened there. (1966). Western world. Size of bubble is size of population. color is continent. Red is Asia, this is Japan. Yellow, Europe. Green, America, this is United States. And blue is Africa. And you had all those developing countries, they were up there, you know, and they had more than 5 children per woman. And these ones had 2 to 3 children per woman. This is child mortality. Here child mortality was below around 30 to 20, and there child mortality was above 100. And very few were in between, very few. There were really 2 types of countries. Dividing the world into developed countries and developing countries was intellectually correct. And the definition used for developing countries, when it started to be used in 1960, was having more than 5 children per woman. Now we will see what has happened. I'll expand this. What did I do there? Something bad like this. There we are. I will run the world now. I have the power to start the world, you know. Here we go. And as the year passes by, child mortality is falling. It's falling first. And then family planning starts in China, and they move to smaller and smaller family here. And you see Brazil is following. They don't care about the Vatican. They put on the condom and then they go down here. Very, very successful. Indonesia is coming here. Muslim Indonesia is coming very fast. And this is Islamic Republic of Iran. See what they are doing. They are creating, you know, access to family planning for the entire population, you know. And there is Bangladesh overtaking India. And look at this. I like this one. This is Ethiopia. Ethiopia moving extremely fast down here. As far as I understand, the country that achieved all Millennium Development Goals. This is the world today. So if this was developing countries, these are the developing countries remaining. How come that these are called developing countries then? What is the definition for developing countries today? Does anyone know the United Nations definition for developing country? You're all right. It doesn't exist. 100% correct on that answer. 100% correct. The United Nations Statistic Division has a place on their web pages. You click enough, you find within the UN system there is no definition for developing country. It's a term used to blah, blah, blah. You used to have what you have. You have an unofficial organization, a think tank based in Paris called OECD. Yes, it's not an official international organization. And the OECD has a DAC committee, a DAC committee. And they had said for statistical purposes, they consider something development aid if it's given to a country below 12,700 and something GNI per capita in Atlas method. Then it is then it becomes a developing country. So aid is given to developing countries because developing countries are those by definition that aid is given to. So there is it's absolutely circular evidence. And UN doesn't have it, but still use it. Still use the term, because it's in the mindset. And politically, I'm told when I speak at different levels in the system, we can't touch it. Because China is so clever, it suits them to be developing. And the most brilliant, the most brilliant disguise which exists is that Singapore is a developing country. They are richer than Sweden, have lower child mortality than Sweden, but in the MDG, yes, you are a developing country. They're very clever, the Singaporeans, very clever. Why should they boast being neighbors to big nations like Indonesia and so on? So in the MDG reports, Singapore, South Korea, and Qatar were all developing countries. There is no intellectual level. It's communication and feelings. We have to have some facts in it. Look here, this is child mortality of Kenya. Childmortality.org, a very good website operated by UNICEF. What I like with this, you have child mortality rates here, 300, 200, 100, 0, 1955, going on all the way to 2015. Each of these colored strip here with some dots is one survey. You see why we know this data. So many surveys have been done. They give a little different results, but you see the pattern. And you see the scary things that happened in 1985. It stopped falling, and it increased 1990. HIV, resistance to malaria drugs, political turmoil, and then this was brought around and it came down like this. And once again, I asked the Swedes, what is the child mortality in Kenya? And the first year, 2012, they said it's there. This is what they estimated. And then I kept teaching. I went into TV. I kept teaching. Yeah, I have some impact. So the Swedes now think it is as it was in 1955. That year I was 7 years old. That means that child mortality is more difficult, isn't it? Number of babies born per woman is easier to perceive. Child mortality, we just don't know the number. But the proportion, and we gave this in percentage, so Swedes thinks that 25% of children die. There's an enormous overestimation of the death rates in low-income countries. One of the most terrible mails I keep getting from secondary school students who do their project work is, well, if you save the life of poor children, you destroy the planet. There's an attitude out in the schools that death keeps back population growth, and it's wrong. Bill and Melinda tells me the same thing. You know, the most common protest they've got over the last 10, 15 years is all these students with environmental concern who says, yeah, this is very nice, but it's an ethical dilemma because when you save these children, you know, you will destroy the planet. And it's wrong. It's just ignorance. Look here. In the past, the two parents got on average 6 children, as I told you. Why didn't the population grow? It was very stagnant. This is like 1 billion here, if this is world population, 1 billion. It didn't grow much because 1, 2, 3, 4 on average died before growing up to become parents themselves. And then some people claim that people were living in ecological balance with nature, and that people today in the rainforest live in ecological balance with nature. Damned lies. People have never lived in ecological balance with nature. They were dying in an ecological balance with nature. They have to arrange funerals for the majority of their children. That's not living in ecological balance. Now, for the first time in the history of mankind, we see a glimmering little possibility, and that's the SDGs, that we may in the future be living in ecological balance with nature. And the whole industrial revolution that took off here in this country, you know, brought us this possibility. So good for burning fossil fuel, let's stop with it now. Because we can't continue with it in the way we have been doing. But without that, we wouldn't even see this chance. This romantic idea that there have been something in the past, and that's promoted in the teaching of the world we're having at present. This continued like this, and in the end here, 1850 to 1900, in Sweden and in Britain, what we saw here was that more children survived. That's the reason why North America was grabbed by the European. That's why 25% of the Swedes moved out to Minnesota, and the world population increased to 7 billion. It's a short world history there, you see. And this rise is still a matter of enormous ignorance. Ignorance number one is that it's called exponential growth. This is no exponential growth. It's exponential growth here to this point. The last 50 years it's been linear, absolutely linear growth. We have added about 1 billion in 14 years. And you keep adding the same amount for each time period, the percent of growth is falling. But no one explains that. Says, oh, the world population is out of control. It's just that they hate people who are colored. No, I'm serious. This is structural racism. It's bloody structural racism. Don't use the term population explosion. It's telling that other people's loved children are bombs. We should use proper wording when we talk about this. There are other words we have taken out in our language of respect of others. This is the next one we should take out. Because we know what is about to happen. We will have the new balance. The old balance was controlled by death. The new balance is controlled by love. Because what we have done, the biggest thing in our time, is that we have disentangled reproduction from sexuality. The two best things in life. Darling, let's have sex tonight. Darling, let's make a baby tonight. Those are not glued up on each other now, as they were in the past. They are separated. And we can enjoy them both. And this is very important. Because who could ever live with another person for several years without sex? You know? It's like the prerequisite for relations. And then being able to decide when and how many children to have. And that's reality for 80% of the world population. It's 20% that lack access to it. And I have to, at this moment, honor the Prime Minister of this country, together with Melinda Gates and the Nigerian politicians who took the initiative of increasing access to contraceptives. The London Agreement, that was in due time, because we have to reach all the way out. And we know that this will happen. Now, how will this happen? How come that if I say that the number of children have stopped increasing, and we have this new balance here, which is decided in the bedroom by the young couple in their pillow talk, that they decide. Why will we get 4 billion more? Something must be wrong, isn't it? And that's counterintuitive. It's sort of counterintuitive. How come if the number of children have stopped growing and we will have this population development, these are the billions today, 1 billion in America, 1 in Europe, 1 in Africa, and 4 in Asia. The good thing with being an independent organization, that Gapminder, we can decide which country is European, you know. So we decided to include Turkey. Otherwise, Europe would be so small, so it wouldn't even fulfill. And then we decided to make Australia Asian. They have to get used to it finally. That joke always works best in Britain. The laugh in Australia is completely different. Pin code 1114. Remember that one, 1114. In 2050, no more in Europe and America, but 1 billion more in Asia. With that extra billion, the fast population growth is over in Asia. And up to the end of the century, 1 billion more in Africa the next 35 years. African population will grow with 100%, double. And by the end of the century, no more in America, Europe, and Asia, but 1 billion and probably 2 billion more in Africa. By this, the world population will stop. Well, how can I add all those billions, 4 billions, if I say the number of children have stopped increasing? I'll show you. I have a special teaching tool here. Each roll of toilet paper is 1 billion people. 1 billion people. We have, in the world today, we have 2 billion who are below 50. These are the children. Next group, 15 to 30, young adults. They are 2 billion. Well, I round off. Actually, they are 1.8. But to make it simple, I do it like this. Next group is 1 billion. Actually, they are 1.4 something. But I make it simple. Then, and this is 30 to 45. 45 to 60, 1 billion. And then it's my group, 60 years and older. And we almost managed to make it to 1 billion because we have some old ones who stay along, And this is the world population today. This is the world population today. Now, why are those... This is like a population pyramid. If I would put it like this, you would recognize the population pyramid. Many of us think that the population pyramid is due to people dying off. No, it's not. It's like children surviving. So the number increased in the base. But now the number down here have stopped increasing. There will be no more children. This is already 71 years. Let's say that life expectancy remain the same. I will now show you how we can add 3 billion people without more children and without longer life. It's like magic. What happens to old people? They die. That's right. They die. The rest of you, have you noted what is happening? You are getting older and older and older. And in 15 years, you are 15 years older and then get the same number of children. This is in 15 years from now. They all die, you grow older and older and older and get the same number of children. They all die, you grow older and older and older and you get, yes, already here. Can you see? You have to get the children. You have to grow older and get the children. So in 45 years from now, you got 3 billion more people. Without any more children. Now some of you look very doubtful, but if you have this at home, you can check. Now, there's one thing more. We are indeed getting longer lives. The whole idea that the world is getting worse, that climate is changing and death rates are increasing and this climate refugee illusion, it's not right. We are going to get 1 billion more there. I want to be this one. I can follow statistics for 15 more years then. Now, I hear a lot of people in organizations, population matters they are called or whatever, those people who can't see the lives through the numbers. They just look at the numbers. They don't see the lives through the numbers. They say, we have to stop population growth for environmental reasons. We can't be more people. We have to stop at 8 billion. Aha, very interesting. No, at least at 9 billion. That's still very interesting. Who are you going to take away? If you want 9 billion, which one are you going to take away? Like this? For the old? Yeah, stop caring for the old, okay, but you still have 10 billion. Who are you going to take away of these ones? This is based on people having the life expectancy we have today and having 1 child each. That is, women on average have 2 children. So the only thing I can understand is that they love Mao Zedong. And they want to have 1-child families. It will look like this. You see it? This is what they want. And where should you start? If you want to solve environmental problems by getting 1-child families, where should you start? Of course in Britain and Sweden. Because we have 2 children per woman. And we consume a lot. So the greatest impact you would have of getting below 2 children is starting in the richer countries. So take away the child allowances, put fees on all schools, and try to win the elections. I don't understand this. This is not about ethics, it's not about anything, it's just ignorance. And people don't understand the seriousness of the sustainability challenge. We have to fix life for about 10 to 11 billion. Can be a little less, can be a little more, somewhere around this. This whole idea, this remain of Paul Ehrlich, that you can avoid these extra billion. There's no way. This is mathematics. And people want to have debate about what 7 plus 4 is. This is not something you debate, something you learn in primary school. But you see, it's full of opinions. It's too much opinion, too much debate. We have to have but you don't need so much core knowledge. Then there's lots of things to debate. There's lots of things of communicate. There's lots of work to be done. I'm not arguing or taking anything away. I just want to add the facts.
Is life expectancy going to increase?
Yes, probably it is. It is increasing in the world. It's going up all the time. And what we are now, if we get away smoking, whoof, we will have many extra years. But gender equity also keeps it down, because the first 2 countries to get gender equity in lung cancer is Iceland and Sweden. And Iceland got it the same year they had a lesbian prime minister, and Sweden got it the same year we had a lesbian bishop. So with rights come the rights to do things the way you want, Whether you love someone of the same sex or you smoke, it's fine. So things, and if the Japanese women start smoking, they will drop their life expectancy, But also when you get gender equity, men lives longer. The gender equity in Sweden, also Britain is following now. The result, if men are more involved with their children and with families and so on, they drink less and they manage better when they divorce. and they live longer. So it will very much be about public health issues, also medical things. If we take away myocardial infarction, heart and stroke, hypertension, we take away cancers, many of them we can reduce, we are left with osteoporosis and Alzheimer. And that kills us later and slowly. The only thing you can hope for is that you get your Alzheimer before your osteoporosis, because then you forget the pain. So it's sort of, yeah, we may have more, but that is not the main. The main thing is the inevitable fill-up of adults. And we know this. This is the projection of population from the UN population division. They said 3 billion in 1958, and then it increased like this, they said. And it wasn't believed. This was published 1960. I was 12 years old. I remember the day in primary school because I had a very good primary school teacher. And she took up things that was in the news. She was modern already back then. And she wrote on the blackboard, now we are 3 billion, 3 and all those zeros. Huh? But United Nations, she said, they are predicting that by the end of this century, when you are old, there will be twice as many, 6 billion. But everyone knows that that will not happen. Aha, we said, no, it cannot happen, because they say that India will have more than 1 billion people. And this is impossible, because Indians are Hindus and Muslims, and they are fatalistic people who cannot plan for the future. And they will starve and they will kill each other. This is what my generation was spoon-fed with. Now it's more subtle. It's more subtle. It's hidden behind environmental concern. But this concern about numbers of population, it's over. We just need to have good conditions for all women in the world, and for them to get away from poverty. As soon as they don't need their children for work, as soon as their children survive, they want contraceptives, and they should get contraceptives because it will bring them away from poverty. We don't need these numbers any longer. We know that we have to be sustainable for around 10 to 11. We don't need to have these population motivations any longer. Those we need to calculate when it comes to sustainability. I will show you that. This is how they did in their forecasts. And then we know, now we know how many it was. 6.1, respect for demography. They were 3% wrong in a 42-year projection, and still today people debate whether they can predict the future or not. If anyone can predict the future, it's demographers. Economists can't. Medical people, we can't. Can we tell us what epidemics we will have next year? No, we can't. They just come as surprises all the time. Many other difficulties, but demographers know these things. This is what will happen. Adults will increase. The inevitable fill-up of adults. I will show you it in more detail here, so you get it clearly. Here's the details. Sorry. Each doll here is 100 millions. This is 1,000 millions, 1 billion. Here it's like this. And what I'm showing you now is this situation, which we have 2015. This is Europe, 15, 30, 45, 60 years. I am this one. European, one of these 100 millions is me in Europe. Americans, almost the same, lacking some retired people in South America. That will soon fill up. Africa, already today, more children than the entire America and Europe together. You start in Argentina, through Brazil, all North America, turn right through Europe, Turkey, all of Russia, and you don't find more children than you have in Africa already. Then Africa is not so many old people. So if by magic Africa would get 2 child families as of tonight, they will still double. Can you see? They will fill up this area eventually. This is the reverse of a population pyramid. We've opened up to see this space that will be filled. China and Asia will not get an older population because they will live longer. They already live long. It's because of the fill-up effect. And the fill-up effect has not been understood. It's called demographic momentum. And that's why I use this. You have to see it visually. If you don't see it visually, I have failed to explain it verbally or in written. You have to see it happening. Here I will show you how it will happen. You see Asia, number of children have stopped increasing. You remember the red line from Asia, it came down to 2. And Africa is still 4.5, so they will continue to increase. How come then, if the number of children will increase in Africa, how come that it won't increase in the world? Because of this. The old die, the rest grow older, and here come the children. And look, one more in Africa, one less in Asia. The number of children will start decreasing in Asia. China is converting primary schools to homes for the elderly. For every 4 children that turns 15 in China, 3 are replaced by Chinese babies, 1 is replaced by a Nigerian baby. What do you think of that? Children are moving, as a group, are moving from Asia to Africa, are moving from higher wealth to lower wealth. That's that the continuous focus on child welfare is very important. Because children is the age group that is not getting richer and richer. Because we still have the fast population growth among the extreme poor. The old die, the rest grow older, and they have children. The old die, the rest grow older, and you have children. You see more and more in Africa and less in Asia. And here, the old die, the rest grow older, and you have children. And you see, the world will be Africa and Asia. This is marginal. The center of the world will no longer be London. It will be Dubai. The North Atlantic will not be the center of world trade. It will be Indian Ocean, not Pacific, Indian Ocean. And this is the big, inevitable fill-up of adults. These ones. They are inevitable. And the whole population projection, many haven't understood that. The population projection is based on continuous fall of fertility rate, of increased access to contraceptives. If you stay with the fertility rates we have today, we will have a huge population in the future. These 10 billion is not nothing happening. It's lots of things happening. It could happen even faster, and that would be nice. If we got 100% of girls in school, if we got 100% vaccinated, 100% of women had access to choose when they want contraceptives. And there can be longer lives. I filed an application for this one. This is what we don't know, how fast Africa gets out of poverty, and why is this decreasing? Why are the number of children decreasing? It's not the one-child family in China. China has 1.6, whereas Hong Kong has 1.1. Why is Hong Kong? And Hong Kong is urban, you would say. Okay, take Taiwan then. Taiwan has 1 child per woman without one-child policy. China has 1-child policy with 1.71 children per woman. First conclusion, the Communist Party is not so powerful in the bedroom. On the squares, yes. The tanks run the squares. They rule the squares, but not the bedrooms. People continue to get kids. So what is it? I learned, that was Macau, it says, but Hong Kong is just next to it. Well, I learned that in Hong Kong when I lecture at the bank conference. We fund a lot of Gapminder's free website is funded by obscene lecture fees that I charge from the financial sector. So I lectured at this bank conference and ended up at the dinner with this very brilliant young banker. She was 37 years old, you know. She told me, this was 5 years ago, she told me about how China would be a net exporter of capital and everything before it happened. And then I asked her at the dessert, you know, do you have a family? And I said, no, I haven't had time, I just work. But would you like to have a family? And she looked out of the window, the Bay of Hong Kong there, sunset, and she smiled and said, yes, I'm thinking about children every day. It's the idea of a husband I can't stand. So you see, at the same time as we have these countries, over here, you know them, Afghanistan, you have Congo, Nigeria high because of the high fertility rate in northern Nigeria, not southern. Huge disparities within Nigeria. These countries we have, at the same time we have the concern of these countries that are below replacement level. What all countries need is balanced population. And the idea that we will solve environmental problems through reducing population from 10 to 11 billion, I just don't think that is irrelevant. It's even a dangerous concept because it takes attention away from where the most pressure of environment is taking place today. I'll show you. I have to jump this one. Now let me show you this. If I put maternal mortality on this axis, I'll do it like this. I put maternal mortality on this axis. I put money here, GNI per capita, the cutoff we are using. We use GNI per capita, exchange rate, 300, 4,000, 13,000 here. This is the average maternal mortality rate of the world today. This is high maternal mortality. Color is fertility rate. So red here is 8 children, yellow is 6 children, green is 4 children. Can you see? And size of the bubble here is number of women dying. What you talked about, number of women dying. You can see where you have big bubbles up here. It's not because they have big population, they have high rates of maternal mortality. And they all have many children. Get contraceptives and you solve almost half of the maternal mortality problem. And then they are blue down here and they become very, very small, the bubbles. America, as Melinda Gates always emphasizes, is the country that increased maternal mortality due to inequity within the country. Now, that's low-income countries. 1 billion people, below $1,000. This is high-income countries, 1 billion people above 13,000. And here in between, middle income. It's a too big group to discuss about. Middle income countries, that's the world population. It's 5 billion plus. You have to divide it in lower middle and upper middle. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. That was what was so interesting with your analysis, Financing the Future. That you segmentize the world. This is how business do. When business want to sell whatever, Coca-Cola, menstruation pad, they segmentize the world and see what is their demand, what can they afford, what is their demand, what can they afford, what is their demand. They don't have one business plan across income ranges so wide. The income difference within middle income countries is 13-fold. You can't treat that as a group. And look, the low-income countries have 450 maternal mortality, here 240, they're 57, and they're 17. The big jump is between lower middle-income countries and upper middle-income countries. This is the big jump. And the way analysis is done in development aid is appalling. And there are many NGOs who have the interest to defend their, what they say, nice projects here. And they are forceful, they're doing good work, but they distort the whole debate and they distort the allocation of huge amount of money for small good projects. We have to have an analytic analysis of this, that this is where the fall really is. Some are $4,000. Probably Gavi, who put the cutoff rate at 1,500, put it too low. And now everyone wants to use another indicator. I hear that. Oh, you can't use money as a cutoff. You can use money as a very good cutoff, but you have to discuss where the cutoff should be. Instead of discussing where the cutoff will be, want to make some other complex indexes. Because aid, after all, is GNI. It's this cash money here where it should be used. I can do the same thing here. This is the new SDG goal for maternal mortality. And you can see it's meaningless to try to do that as an average of the world. MDG were the low-hanging fruit and we could use world average. SDG are the high-hanging fruit, not only high-hanging, but high in remote rural areas that are difficult to reach. And you have to have very specific analysis, much more advanced thinking. Otherwise, this will be nothing. And it's partly data, I agree with you. Of course I agree with you. But it's also the ability to handle data, not for communication purposes, for God's sake, but for analysis purposes and investment purposes. That is what data is mainly used, as you rightly said. Child mortality, same thing here. Color, size of bubble, number of children dying, color is fertility rate, and here, this of course is Angola. If you get rich fast from oil, it takes you 1 generation to convert that money into social progress. And we expect Angola to come down here, as had done other oil countries in the past. Middle income countries here, 76, 53, 19, 7. Once again, independent. The big jump is there to there. As of today, no longer discussing middle income country as a group. Cut them in the middle. Because this is somewhere where you get really, you start to get welfare here. And looking at civil registration, as you said, there is no way we will help extreme poverty by civil registration, because you can't start by registering the birth and the death of a child without having no services whatsoever. But when you have services, then you should have birth registration so you don't miss out. But those in extreme poverty here, you know, we have to have the fragile nations, which are this group up here, they have much higher. So even within the low, that's also what you did in Financing the Future. You divided the low-income countries into 2 groups. That was brilliant. It was a very advanced document. And that is the reason why I'm so proud to be able to stand here in some exchange for that. I'll jump this one. Now, this is how a remote district looks like in rural Africa or inside India. A district with 300,000 people. They have a river passing this way. They have a road passing this way. And they have a district capital that happens to be exactly where the road crosses the river. And where do the people in extreme poverty live? You said that we had to have the information. Yes, but we have to convert information into understanding. And we know where the extreme poor are. They're not in slums. They are there. This is the hospital in the center. There's a health center there, and there's a health center there and there. And those in extreme poverty who doesn't have access to maternal care, they live there, and there. This is where Boko Haram hides. This is from where the Ebola virus came. We cannot have these corners. Extreme poverty is unstable for the entire country, for the entire world. This has to be finished. It can be done in 15 years, if it's focused directly. But numbers are not mainly for communication, it's for analysis. I think I stop there. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Hans. That was exceptional, and I'm certainly never going to look at a toilet roll in the same way again. Now, we have time for some questions for the audience. We'll take questions, I think, in groups of 2, so that Hans can remember them and answer them all fully. There are people around with microphones. If you could please, when you get the microphone, very quickly introduce yourself, your name and your organisation, if you are affiliated with an organisation. And then please keep a question very brief and a genuine question. This is just to be fair to everybody else who wants to ask, because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people who are going to want to pick up on some of the points from that really stimulating presentation. So let's start.
And also protest, because I made a lot of simplification. I'm really grateful if you correct this either here, afterwards to me, or on the web somewhere. Do criticize.
Good. Right, I'm going to start with these 2 here, gentleman here, and the woman 2 rows behind him.
Can you talk